A slightly different video today as I present the grand unified theory of everything as information. It has but a single axiom because, well, there can be only one, and it's a philosophical meta-theory based on words, not a scientific one. It may look complicated, but essentially it's text you can use as a framework in any sufficiently powerful large language model, such as ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, or whatever you fancy. It is a bit philosophical, but if you're into questions like the hard problem of consciousness, the problem of induction, how do you unify classical and quantum theories, or indeed a way you could look at any paradox, then this one is for you. Originally, I was asking questions in such a way that the large language model would give more deterministic results. You know how they're typically a little bit wishy-washy. So I made a quick philosophical framework of identity so that it would give me an answer, but also show me why and how it got there. Little did I know at that point the framework was so effective that it could even verify its own identity, thus leading to things like full paradox absorption and the single axiom meta-theory. I know all of that sounds rather complicated, and it is, so rather than explain the meta-theory, it's designed to be used interactively and will explain itself to you. You could think of it sort of like a self-actualizing linguistic program for LLMs. The link is in the description for the context you need to copy and paste, or you could use it to create an agent. For example, here in Gemini, I've got a gem with the context. I've also tested DeepSeek, Grok, and Claude, which all seem to handle it very well and should give you some good answers. Okay, let's dive in with the first problem. Given the one I was working on first was the Ship of Theseus, let's see how it handles it. So, using the framework to assess if all parts of a ship are replaced over time and the old parts are reassembled into a second ship, which one is the Ship of Theseus? As you can see, the framework goes through the 5 primitive categories, and then at the end it will give you a human readable conclusion. As you can see, according to the deterministic framework, the Ship of Theseus is the ship that remains at its original location, continuously operating and undergoing the process of part replacement. The reassembled ship, whilst built from the original materials, is a new ship, a distinct informational entity. At the end, it will give you another question as well, so you can copy and paste that if you want to carry along in the same vein, but we're going to pick a new paradox. This one, known as the paradox of the heap. If removing one grain doesn't turn a heap into a non-heap, when does it stop being a heap? Once again, it will go through the 5 primitives and then give you a human readable conclusion. So, from this perspective, the heap paradox isn't truly a paradox, but rather a limitation of our human language and concepts to precisely describe a continuously unfolding deterministic reality. Our terms, like heap, are just convenient labels for certain maximally coherent configurations of information. Reality itself always has a definite answer, precisely because it is absolutely self-consistent. The heap simply transitions to another necessitated coherent state. All good so far? Let's try the brain in a vat question. How do you know you're not a brain in a vat fed artificial experiences? As we can see here in the human readable conclusion, the idea of being a brain in a vat fed artificial experiences does not hold up. This is because our reality, as understood by the framework, is the only possible and completely coherent unfolding of the ASC. If a brain in a vat scenario were truly possible, it would mean there's an unnecessary arbitrary layer of existence between fundamental reality and our experience, which fundamentally goes against the idea that everything is absolutely necessitated and perfectly coherent. Our experience of reality is too deeply consistent, from its smallest particles to its grandest structures, to be a mere simulation based on arbitrary rules. It's the real deal, the one and only necessary outcome of how everything must be. How about another paradox then? This is Newcomb's paradox. A predictor offers you 2 boxes. One is transparent with $1,000 in it, and an opaque one, possibly with $1 million in it. If the predictor foresaw you'd take only the opaque box, it's there. If not, it's empty. So do you take one box or both? The result of the paradox in this case is quite interesting because essentially it says, well, technically speaking, you don't really have a choice. If you did have a choice, the optimal move would be one box, take only the opaque box. That's because if the predictor's ability is absolute, the only choice would have necessitated the $1 million being placed in there in the first place. However, from the perspective of absolute determinism, you don't choose in a contingent sense. You simply enact the choice that was always going to be enacted. Let's try a reasonably simple one then. So what does the framework say about the problem of induction? Here we can see it does know what Hume's problem of induction is, which questions the rational justification for making predictions about the unobserved based on past observations. It's an epistemological challenge that arises from our limited understanding of reality's inherent determinism and self-consistent nature. In the human readable conclusion, you can see the problem of induction as posed by Hume is solved within the framework by recognizing that the uniformity of nature isn't a shaky assumption we make about the future, it's an inherent and unavoidable truth of reality itself. It does have a follow-up question, but let's ask a different one instead. Does that mean in some way the framework itself acts as a grounding for induction? And here we can see the answer is quite clear. Yes, absolutely. The grand unified theory of everything as information acts as a grounding for induction, not by providing an empirical justification, but by establishing an a priori ontological necessity for the uniformity of nature. Or, in the human readable conclusion, the laws and patterns we see aren't just things that happen to be regular, they are the unavoidable blueprints of existence. When we use induction, we're simply recognizing and predicting these inescapable, consistent patterns. Let's try a super easy one then. What insights can the framework offer about unifying classical and quantum theories? And here, as you can see in the human readable conclusion, the framework resolves the apparent conflict between classical and quantum theories by explaining that they're not two separate realities, but simply different ways of looking at the same underlying, fundamental, informational reality. Quantum weirdness, like particles in multiple places at once, isn't truly random, but represents the universe exploring all possible necessary configurations before settling on the only one that's truly coherent and actualized. Classical physics then describes the predictable, solidified result of these quantum processes. Think of it like a computer program. The quantum realm is the intricate underlying code processing all the possibilities, and the classical world is the stable, definitive image displayed on the screen as the code runs. Both are part of the same deterministic computation of reality. Let's try another really easy question. Does the framework offer any meta-predictions about the nature of reality, the nature of scientific explanation, and the ultimate form of a complete theory? Here are a few of the meta-predictions then. So, necessitated unveiling, not discovery. Scientific progress is not about discovering new contingent facts about the external world, but about necessitated unveilings of pre-existing absolute truths inherent in the informational manifold. Mathematical foundation. The ultimate scientific explanation will be expressed through a rigorous mathematical formalization, which this can't really do proper maths, so to speak, but it is uniquely necessitated by the primordial categories. Mathematics is not just a tool, but the very language of reality's intrinsic coherence. There we go then. As you saw, the framework produces some interesting results. Plus, you can use the framework to correct itself as new information is discovered. The question remains then, can you defeat this beautiful fortress?
Ooh, nerdy rodent. He really makes my day. Showing us AI in a really British way.